Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the launch and discussion around the report, Pathways to and Beyond Education for Refugee Youth in Jordan and Lebanon. This event is a joint collaboration between the Issam Fares Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs at the American University of Beirut and Abdullah Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education. We will begin today's event with a welcoming address and introductory remarks by Dr. Lina Shwairi, Associate Provost at AUB, and Ms. Maisa Jalbout, CEO of the Abdullah Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education. Next, the report's findings will be presented, allowing for comments from UNHCR and UNRWA representatives. Following this, the student panel before the concluding remarks. I will now leave the floor for Dr. Shwairi.
Where do you want me?
Wherever you
prefer. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for your presence today for this launching event for the joint IFI Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education report on education for refugee youth in Jordan and Lebanon. The event is only half a day long, and I'm sure we're all more eager to listen to the panelists and experts than you are to listen to me, so I'm not going to be very long. I've been a faculty member for the better part of my professional life, and it will not come as a surprise to you if I told you that education has always been at the center of my attention. Since I took office as Associate Provost just over a year ago, I have seen how this engagement has been shared by my colleagues across the university, and I have experienced more closely how AUB is and has always been committed to living up to its mission to serve the people of the Middle East and beyond. Through research, of course, but also teaching and engaged service. That's why I'm very happy that AUB, through IFI, is hosting the launch of this report today. I've had an opportunity to look over the report, and I'm struck by how much this study, which is meant to explore the state of refugee education in Jordan and Lebanon, and to identify the key challenges to access and completion, is also a window onto our educational system and its challenges as well. By the way, this is a recurrent finding that has come up in many projects that I have been involved in directly or indirectly, or other faculty members or colleagues have been involved in. So we keep finding that, you know, we are not just finding data and information and documenting education among refugee communities, but we are understanding better the shortcomings, the challenges of our education systems and the provision of education to all our people in this part of the world. There is and has been a crisis in higher education looming at the horizon, and there have been calls for urgent reform to address the rapidly changing economic, social, as well as technological contexts. And the refugee crises in our part of the world have added stress onto an already vulnerable system. If that is the case, then finding the pathways to and beyond education to our refugee youth might perhaps serve as the trigger for a transformation that our education system really needs. That's the end of my welcoming remarks. With this, I'm going to leave the podium to Ms. Maisa Jalbout, and welcome again to you all at AUB.
Good morning, Sabah al-Khair. I'd like to begin by thanking the Issam Fares Institute and the American University of Beirut for hosting this important event today. The Institute and the university have become the focal point for research and debate on some of the most critical issues of the region. And for that, all of us in this space owe them a debt of gratitude. Our region is fraught with challenges such as the refugee crisis, but we, especially in the philanthropic sector, have often lacked the most basic data and information to help us make and understand the issues that we are trying to address. I hope that the research collaboration between the Abdallah Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education and the Isam Faris Institute will become the norm rather than the exception. Because it's only when we invest in knowledge that we can begin to work together more effectively in addressing the challenges we face. Since the launch of the Abdallah Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education in 2015, we've been singularly focused on supporting Arab youth to succeed through education opportunities. It was also our founder's mission to make sure that the generous funding that he provided supports the most vulnerable youth in the Arab region, including refugees. Refugee youth are now 20% of the beneficiaries of the foundation. Inspired by Abdallah Al-Ghureir, his son, Abdul Aziz Al-Ghureir, also established his own initiative to support refugee education in June 2018. The Abdul Aziz Al-Ghureir Refugee Education Fund constitutes the largest financial commitment by a private donor in this field since the start of the Syrian refugee crisis. But given the size and the magnitude of the challenge, it is still a very modest contribution for the amount of resources needed. Over 3 years ago, together with our current and future partners, or over 3 years with our future partners, we aim to help 20,000 refugee youth to complete secondary, vocational, and higher education in Lebanon, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. I hope the report we are launching today, Pathways to and Beyond Education for Refugee Youth in Jordan and Lebanon, will encourage many more donors to channel more resources to refugee youth who have been overlooked and urgently need our support. Among other critical information, the report presents an alarming statistic. Less than 5% of refugee youth enroll and complete secondary and tertiary education in Jordan and Lebanon. Let me close by saying that we are not only looking forward to your feedback on the report, but also for any form of collaboration. It is our hope that this information will spur urgent action in support of refugee youth in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to now invite Dr. Hana Adam Al-Ghali, the Director of the Education and Youth Policy Program at IFI, and Dr. Samar Farah, the Research Manager at Abdallah Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education, to present the key findings and main recommendations of the report.
خير وشكرا كثير لحضوركم. حانتقل للإنجليش هلا لأنه الإيفنت هي باللغة الإنجليزية. Good morning and thank you everyone for coming. We are also very pleased for this collaboration, and we are actually very happy that we were able to collaborate and address issues of refugees that include Palestinian refugees as well, not only Syrians. And so today, as Fida mentioned, we're going to go over a few snapshots from the report. But I have to also mention before we start that perhaps, the crisis has been going on for the past almost a decade now. And perhaps you may think that we already know many of the challenges that refugees go through, and in terms of education. And we probably, as practitioners and people working in this area, probably you are aware of many of those issues that prevent further education for refugees. However, we strongly believe that it is important to continue to highlight these challenges, especially that many of those challenges, even though they have been discussed over and over, still are persisting in terms of keeping the refugees from continuing their education. And what is key to the report as well, and somewhat will also speak to that, are the recommendations that we are highlighting. So without further delaying this, I'm going to be very brief, trying to go through snapshots, as I mentioned, and you're welcome to read the report online, and also grab a copy, a draft copy from outside. So it is important to mention that the countries that we've addressed in the report, in terms of Lebanon and Jordan, are countries that have the highest inhabitants, per capita inhabitants among the refugees in the country. So Lebanon, for example, has about 33% of its population who are refugees. And Jordan similarly has a large refugee population. If we look closer at each country, we see that about 1 to 3 refugees are present in Jordan among the population, and there are 1 to 4 refugees in Lebanon as well. What is significant to education is that 45% of the Syrian children and youth aged 5 to 18 in Lebanon and Jordan are not enrolled in any form of formal education. Taking a closer look at each of those countries, we also see that there is about, in Lebanon, 26% of the youth are ages 13 to 25 years. And in Lebanon, among the Syrians, in Lebanon, this becomes more significant among the Syrian population, where about 50% of the population are ages between, school-aged, between 5 to 18 and above. There are only 25% of those Syrians who are enrolled in schools, in public schools, and 74% do not have any legal residency. And these are all significant for education, and we'll mention why. 2.4% of the Syrians are actually enrolled in secondary school, and 6% only are enrolled in universities. And so imagine you have more than 500,000 young people who are eligible to go to schools and universities, and only 2.4% actually get to go to secondary school, and 6% get to go to universities. Among the Palestinians, we have 7% of the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon who are enrolled in UNRWA schools, and it becomes easier for the Palestinians to access schools within the UNRWA space because they're tuition free. And you might think, but also public schools are tuition free. Well, it's also important to remember that to apply or to sit for the grade 9 examination, the brevet, the students need identifications. And for many, even Palestinians who have been here for a long time, may not have proper identification. In Jordan, 5% of the school-aged children are enrolled in UNRWA schools. And for the Syrians, we know that 19% school-age children are enrolled in schools. Data has been emerged as a challenge within the research that we've undertaken together. And it is interesting to mention in the case of Jordan that Palestinians have a different kind of perception within the community. So although we do mention that 5% of school-age children are enrolled in UNRWA schools, many Palestinians are also enrolled in the public schools in Jordan. So without spending more time on the numbers, we're going to go to our key findings. Our first key finding addresses the issue of funding. And we noticed that funding is an issue across the primary, secondary, and university levels, and within the scope of Palestinian refugees as well as Syrian refugees. And this problem has become worsened with the financial crisis within UNRWA, where funding has been cut. And so, typical to any emergency situation, usually education is one of the sectors that is first targeted. Then, within the sector of education, primary education is the one that receives the most funding, and then secondary and higher education and TVET do not necessarily receive funding within a case of an emergency. In Lebanon and Jordan, we've seen this similar case as the cut in funding. However, what we're seeing is also that because of this decrease in funding for the higher levels, we're seeing a large dropout among the young people who are enrolled in primary education, and so not many people are reaching secondary education. And at the same time, there's not a lot of funding to support that shift as well. And so instead of seeing a narrowing pipeline to higher education and TVET and secondary education, in Jordan and in Lebanon, we're seeing an evolving pipeline that is almost collapsing. Our second key finding is the significant gap in access and completion to secondary level, which has also been mentioned in parallel to the issue of funding. And so this decreasing number of enrollment in secondary and TVET is both because of structural issues within the system, but also issues that are beyond the system, particularly where we see negative coping strategies among the refugees. For example, secondary age children or youth are seeking marriage or employment to support their families, and so as a result, they will be dropping out of school. Another key finding that we also addressed in our report is the issue of vocational education. One, as I mentioned, the lack of data has been a struggle across all the sectors, but particularly for vocational education, when we were looking at numbers of how many are enrolled in vocational education. And the quality of that as well was a challenge to identify. And we did see that there was a lack of investment in vocational education. So most of the funding would go to formal education in public schools, but not to technical and vocational education. In Lebanon, for example, we saw that 1.6% of the Syrian youth are enrolled in technical vocational education, and 4% of the Palestinian youth are enrolled in such practice. And the last key finding was that it is great we are supporting the young people to further their education, but what are the prospects after graduation? And this remains, I think, the question since the crisis has started and as the crisis continues. And as we see an increase in scholarships for refugees, and as we see that more students now are probably completing the regular secondary education in Jordan and Lebanon, so they are becoming more eligible to continue through higher education in these countries, or TVET, for example. However, what is the relevance of their education to employability? And this is by no means a call for opening the formal employability for refugees within these two countries, but rather it is a call for innovation. Let us try to think of innovative ways to allow these young people to, in order to construct their livelihoods in a positive way, and also see the prospects of what will happen with my education in the future. Just a quick example from Jordan. In 2016, for example, the work permits that were offered for Syrian refugees were mostly in agriculture, forestry, and fishery, and in other sectors that do not necessarily require technical training. Like, for example, the professional, scientific, and technical activities were quite low, and those also given for education was quite low as well as human health and social work. And so with that, I'll give it over to Samar for recommendations.
Thank you, Hannah. Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'll now discuss the policy recommendations that we outline in the report. So to scale support to refugee education, we identified 5 primary areas of opportunity that deserve greater attention. And many of them will be ones that you're already familiar with, but as Hannah said, we feel that it's important to highlight some of these, the areas that deserve a lot of attention and support, just to reinforce some of the work that organizations are already doing that is really great, but also help to steer organizations that may be interested in doing more or identifying opportunities. First and foremost, as mentioned earlier, providing more sustainable financing, especially for secondary and TVET. As Hannah noted, we're all aware of the huge funding gap for refugee education. Based on the data we've collected, we're seeing high numbers of students drop out, as Hannah mentioned, before even enrolling in secondary education, and once enrolled, so very few students are actually completing. Without greater and more consistent investment in these areas, it's unlikely that we'll see students transitioning into TVET and higher education. And so, providing funding at higher levels is important, but if we're not addressing the issue at the core of where it's happening, all the other efforts will not be as valuable. The second policy recommendation is the importance of investing in remedial and accelerated learning programs at the secondary level. following on from the first recommendation, funding is important, but it's important for it to be used effectively. There's a need for targeted academic programs, especially in subjects like English and math and others, that would help students pass their exam, that help them transition into secondary education and allow them to complete secondary education. There are already some good programs in place, both in Jordan and in Lebanon, but obviously based on the data that we see in terms of completion rates for secondary, they're not enough, and so there's a need for greater investment in that area. The third recommendation is providing professional academic orientation and counseling for refugees all across the different levels of education. Academic guidance is something that's not available for all students in the Arab world, and we've known that from a lot of the research that we've done. Most public schools don't offer that kind of support at high school, so that's something that's desperately needed. But in the case of a refugee student, it's especially important because they're in a system that's foreign to theirs, and their pathways within education and beyond education are much more restricted due to policy restrictions. So one of the things that we learned through the study is that there are large numbers of refugee youth who perhaps because of a lack of guidance or because of the types of scholarships that are available to them at higher education are pursuing academic programs that are neither relevant to the local job market or that in their home country, and that leaves them with very few skills that they can utilize or transfer into something else. And by accessing proper academic guidance earlier on in their education, students can make more informed decisions about the directions that they decide to take. And it can also help reduce the number of youth that are dropping out of programs or switching programs once they get into TVET or higher education. And we at the Foundation have also noticed from our own experience in managing scholarships for Arab youth, including refugees, that refugees face greater barriers when accessing higher education or in general in transitioning from one stage to another. And so having a support system during these transition cycles is critical to ensuring that they can persist and complete. That includes professional psychosocial support as well as other forms of professional help, as well as more informal communities like peer mentoring, ensuring that they're part of a cohort of students who come from similar backgrounds where they can experience the process together. All of these things make a difference in their experience. The fourth recommendation is offering more innovative and labor market responsive solutions to TVET that will change its image, build on successful models globally, but also establish stronger ties with the employers. We can't expect youth to change their perceptions of TVET if we don't redesign it in a way that it is recognized, where they can get a credential that is internationally recognized in the way that universities do, and one that is valued by employers. We have seen the rise of few models in the region where they are trying to build on what has succeeded very well in other countries. One example that we're aware of closely is Luminous Education in Jordan, where they have gained a lot of international support and attention for the work that they've done, and they have very strong partnerships with employers that have helped them place their students in internships, apprenticeships, but also help host communities, host students access jobs relatively quickly. These are the kinds of models that we would like to see more of and that need more support and that would benefit all students in these countries. And finally, as with TVET, we need to align higher education with the needs of the future. And again, as Lena said earlier, this is something that applies to all students and not just refugees. Universities are not designed strictly to prepare students for their careers. They do much more than that. But we believe these linkages can be stronger with what happens to students after they graduate. With the growing education and skills gap that we're seeing in the region, and knowing that refugee youth are limited in the kinds of post-university options that they have, it's especially important that they graduate with the kinds of specializations and skills that will make them competitive wherever they go. So this can best be achieved by ensuring that curricula are more aligned with the specializations that are needed in the labor market, and allowing students to have experiential learning before they graduate. So whether it's internships, apprenticeships, entrepreneurship programs, anything that allows them to actually develop practical skills that will equip them once they graduate. Finally, we're also seeing the rise of online and blended learning as an access and upskilling tool. Although there are very few examples in the region so far, we've seen many cases of it transform the lives of refugee youth and provide them with opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have had access to. However, there still remain challenges to be addressed before we can scale this as a model for refugees. Obviously, there's issues around accreditation by local governments, recognition from employers, but also ensuring that the students, that we as organizations are supporting students through some of these programs, are investing in high quality programs that provide students with enough support to make sure that they can actually succeed in these programs. And that's something that we see, at the foundation to be critical to ensure that they can succeed. But I think it's important to note that this field is growing very, very rapidly globally. So it's important that we in the region don't fall behind and we continue to explore the pathways and the opportunities in which this model will actually work and can be utilized to the best, to best serve the educational goals of refugee youth. So it's something that deserves greater attention, obviously research, but also investment. So I will end here, and we welcome your comments and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hana and Dr. Samad. I would like to now invite Ms. Agatha Abiad, Associate Education Officer at UNHCR, and Mr. Salim Deeb, Chief Field Education Program at UNRWA, to please join us by sharing their insights on the report.
Would I expect you to ask me any question, or should I go with the flow? Hello, everyone. And thank you, Al Ghurer and AUB for this very, very fruitful report. It was very easy to go through it, straight to the point, and recommendations were very clearly articulated. And we would always cherish and need this kind of reports because it will help us also engage in future activities and innovate, because also I think the last recommendation was all about innovation. So I'll try to go through a bit, we read the report during the weekend, so the draft report during the weekend. So I would go through some challenges that I would like to pinpoint. For example, when reading the different challenges mentioned, and allow me to be very critical first against myself and against maybe the whole UN narrative, we need to unpack all the barriers that have been mentioned, meaning legislative barriers, as well as challenges when it comes to documentation. I think after 8 years of the crisis, we really need to unpack and to go through and not to be afraid to go through in depth. For example, when mentioning that for example, numbers are not sufficient enough in secondary education. Based on UNESCO and UNICEF numbers, it seems that secondary students number is growing, as well as based on UNICEF reports. Also, it seems that the TVET access is equally growing. So maybe we need to focus on lesson learned and how these students individually made it to be able to replicate this model also around. When it comes also to legislative barriers, it was mentioned as number one barrier. I would like here to pinpoint that despite the fact that we don't have any law that makes it smooth to refugees to access education, we've seen some effort from the Ministry of Education and from the Lebanese University, as well as from private universities, whereby they were able to overpass some barriers, meaning the equivalence access. Maybe to get their equivalence, students do not need to present a residency permit anymore. And this is something that we need to always inform refugees and make them aware of these kind of processes. Another document also when it comes to legislative, and here I would like to be a bit also critical towards UNHCR. We keep on mentioning that the lack of documentation is not allowing our students to go into secondary education and later on into tertiary education. However, we need to also balance. It's been, unfortunately, 8 years of the crisis. It's not about students not able to get their documentation from Syria only. It's about students not able to get their documentation from non-formal education in Lebanon as well, because they have been in a system in Lebanon that unfortunately do not allow them to go into their secondary pathway as smooth as possible. So also I think it is time to unpack that, because these might be the students that we're searching for whenever we talk about out-of-school children. So I would like here also to mention that the government is showing some humanitarian and empathy. However, we're still touching on soft laws. We're not touching on the hard laws and the change of laws. So it's all about SDGs, which is great, but it is allowing some flexibility, and also it is allowing some slaloming around the laws. When it comes to if I was surprised or not by any findings, so indeed, and I was not surprised to see that all the money and all the support is going to primary education. It is a crisis. However, we believe that also the international community has been responding to secondary education, whether by UNESCO supporting in tuition fees, and UNHCR always showing that they're ready to fill the gap. What I understood from UNESCO lately is that around 5,000 are in public schools when it comes to secondary education. So if the number exceeds that number and UNESCO are not able to support, we are ready to chip in as UNHCR, and we have always told that to the Ministry of Education. Language. Was I surprised to hear that language is a barrier, and again a barrier? So all UN agencies and all the international community are putting a lot of effort in foreign language support, as well as remedial classes, etc. We need to also help the Ministry of Education evaluate what has happened throughout the 8 years, and if a child has been in public or even private education for the past 8 years and he's not able to fluently articulate a foreign language, we need to question our system. And it's not to pinpoint to the Ministry of Education at all. It's about to pinpoint to ourselves first. What's happening? We need to be accountable for we need to make it accountable, because we're accountable towards the students. If a child has been in education in cycle 1, 2, 3, and is unable to articulate in a foreign language, there's something missing in the system, and any foreign language group support in the afternoon would never be enough. TVET, oh my God, about TVET. It became death by TVET. Sorry to be so naive on that point, but the system have never been robust in Lebanon for TVET. We all know it, we all acknowledge it. So what are we doing? Friday, I was in a conference for Torino process. They were revising the Torino process every 2 years. And I found that if we calculate the number of students compared to number of teachers in TVET, in the public sector, we have a ratio of 5 youth or 5 students against 1 teacher. It's private tutoring at this level. And every child is costing the government $5,000 to go into BP or BT or TS. So, again, it's a lot of investment. However, any one of us now is ready to put his child into a TVET system? I will not be the first one to do so, because I'm questioning a system that unfortunately needs to be very flexible and to be the excellence in our, to show the excellence in our students. Unfortunately, we're not finding it. So whatever sometimes we're investing in TVET, it's band-aid. So we're not going into the source. We need to be innovative. We need to give them competency and market-based vocational education, and not only hide behind whatever is being done. We have seen a lot of investment in that, and this is great. However, we cannot scale it up because the market would be flooded. So also we need to be aware to diversify and to diversify per region. And I'm not even talking about the psychosocial support that is given to TVET sector students. It's non-existing. If we can find some DOPS in public schools, in the academia, we find nobody in the TVET system when it comes to counseling and psychosocial support. We've seen some innovative approach in orientation, excellent, but we need to keep on the good work in that. The elephant in the room is employability. Employability. So here, because Al Ghurair Foundation are next to me, I would allow myself to be very, very open on that and mention that it's a delicate situation here in Lebanon. And as a UNHCR officer, the first thing I would like to do is again and again thank the government for hosting and understand that it is a delicate position that we are facing here. So maybe the window that we can open is that whenever a scholarship is given, the donor would be engaged into providing some internship to the student, internship in an online service or connected learning or even abroad. So we've seen some very good models whereby, for example, scholarships abroad like the Canadian as well as the Japanese initiative whereby they would take students for scholarships in their countries and then allow them residency in the country. So I think these models, though they will only be helping a very minor ratio of all the refugees, however, they are excellent model to ensure that tertiary education is pursued all the way by our students. Nothing to add on new initiatives. You have mentioned several. Connected learning has been in the dynamic of our discussions at higher education level for the past 6 months, and I think we've started to see some initiatives. Youth BLN also with the Ministry of Education, they are initiating some youth basic literacy and numeracy as well as accelerated learning program for youth. This is what we needed for the past. This is what we needed for the past 5 years, and now we're happy that it started being there. And that's it from my end, and of being critical. And thank you again, because it's always interesting to see that. And please do take the critics as part of advancing together, because I would first point to myself that we are not doing enough. Thank you.
Good morning, all. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks to AUB, American University of Beirut, Sam Faris Institute, and the Abdullah Foundation, Al Ghurair Foundation, for hosting this event, which is much relevant to the Palestinian refugees and much relevant to what UNRWA actually is supporting. Thanks the ladies, first of all, Hannah, Samar, and Agatha, who left, I think, nothing for me to say. And reviewing the report, actually, yes, it matches a lot with what UNRWA is challenging, is facing in terms of challenges, and particularly when it comes to secondary education and technical and vocational education and scholarships. I would like to focus more, actually, on these challenges in the perspective of UNRWA, which is the umbrella of Palestinian refugees and the main service provider for Palestinian refugees since 1949. Facing a lot of instability in the region and here in the country in Lebanon, particularly when it comes to camps and impacting and challenging actually and interrupting the youth education adds also further challenges to UNRWA. Now, in terms of challenges, and I would like to highlight what UNRWA is facing now. UNRWA's budget is $1.2 billion and annually. We started 2019 with less 800 million. We started with less 800 million, which means that the financial crisis of UNRWA that starts in 2015 is continuing actually in 2019 and adding more and more challenges to UNRWA in terms of equality of education and in terms of provision of secondary education and TVET, taking into consideration that secondary education and TVET are beyond the UNRWA mandate, because UNRWA mandate actually focuses on basic education, primary education. Financial crisis means a lot of austerity measures, and again, it impacts equality, particularly when it comes to secondary education and the TVET. Now, the sustainability of the secondary education and the TVET education is at stake. I mean, take into consideration that there is big investment in secondary education, and by the way, we have 65 schools here in Lebanon, out of which we have 9 secondary schools. And we accommodate around 37,000 Palestinian refugee children in the 65 schools. Around 4,500 go for secondary education. In the TVET, we have around 900 Palestinian refugee youth benefiting from one center with 2 campuses. One campus in the south, close to Saida area, Sibylline Training Center, and another campus actually established after the MBC crisis in the north, and it's continuing at lower profile in the north. Currently, we have a lot of initiatives regarding improving the quality of the TVET provision. And many thanks to generous support of the EU in supporting UNRWA in its emergency appeal projects, actually, supporting the primary education, the secondary education, and the TVET. And recently, we have a TVET assessment, actually supported by the EU. We are looking towards improving the quality of TVET, improving its responsiveness to labor market needs. And based on this assessment, we are more towards competency-based training. And this is actually a need to reform the whole TVET provision in terms of the courses, and it's relevant to the labor market needs in terms of the accreditation, because recently, a couple of years ago, actually, Sibylline Training Center, which was established in 1962, is working without accredited courses by the Ministry of Education. Recently, since 2017, we have accredited courses. And we will work in parallel, actually, to promote these accredited courses so that our students will be able to sit for national exams and to continue and to bridge for higher education in universities. Another challenge here is the scholarship. UNRWA has been providing scholarship to Palestinian refugees since the 1990s. And particularly after the statistics after 2000, we have 928 students benefited from the scholarships within UNRWA. It was a sort of some partners supporting and giving and funding the scholarship program. But recently, due to the financial deficit of UNRWA, we have a transitional strategy because our partners will no more provide direct funding to UNRWA. It will be a sort of seeking more partners, actually, seeking better accessibility to Palestinian refugee youth towards higher education. So we have a transitional strategy now where UNRWA will have no direct management of scholarships, but rather supporting in relation with partners, actually, to have more access of Palestinian refugee youth to scholarships. It continues to be a challenge to us as UNRWA. From the beginning, UNRWA, particularly the Syrian crisis in 11 and 12, we accommodated in our schools, primary and secondary, all the refugees coming from Syria that we call PRS. Currently, out of the 37,000 I mentioned, we have around 5,500 PRS, I mean Palestinian refugee coming from Syria, distributed almost in our schools in Lebanon. Among the 5,500, we have around 300 only in our secondary education, which is almost 5% of the PRS, Palestinian refugees, youth coming from Syria, 5% only, which is an indicator, you see, that there is a challenge, big challenge, in terms of enrollment and continuing education, higher education to PRS youth. When it comes to TVET, unfortunately, we have 5% in the TVET are PRS. And again, this is due to the instability of the Palestinian refugees coming from Syria and vulnerability mainly, because they, after the basic education, there is an inclination in these families to send their children to labor market more than continuing their higher education in TVET or in secondary education. Initiatives, yes, UNRWA did a lot of initiatives. The big initiative is the education reform that started in 2011. And we had a lot of investment in education reform, addressing educational issues at different cycles, actually. We implemented school-based teacher development as professional development programs to teachers. We implemented Leading for the Future for all school principals. We did a lot in inclusive education. We have our inclusive education policy, strategy, and the framework. We did a lot of investment in the reform that improved actually the quality and accessibility of the Palestinian refugee children and youth to education system in UNRWA. And also we focused on the, what Agatha mentioned actually in terms of connecting the schools. We are more towards not only focusing on the academic issues in the curriculum, but more on the extracurricular issues. And in this context, we implement in line with the Ministry of Education and Higher Education, the community service projects, which is part of the secondary graduation. We are implementing the ISA, the International School Award Program in our schools. We are implementing e-twinning in coordination with MIHI, which focuses again on building capacity of teachers to connect their schools, their students locally and local education institutions and internationally. We implemented My Voice, My School, particularly addressing the PRS children and giving them platform actually to communicate with international schools. In terms of what's innovative actually in this context, adding to what UNRWA is doing in terms of education reform, with the, we established recently, a couple of 3 years ago, a youth unit. And a youth unit is working to empower youth as one package. So we have our youth framework, and we are supporting youth in TVET, in scholarship, and in what we called innovation labs recently. So in the 2 campuses, we are establishing innovation labs. With these innovation labs, we are empowering youth towards entrepreneurship skills on one side, and IT applications so that they will be capable of online employment using IT applications. This is the objective of innovation labs, and this is one way or another empowering youth actually towards improving their livelihood in addition to education. Partnership we are seeking partnership because we have good mapping, not only in a scholarship, but also in supporting education at different levels, in the primary level or in the secondary level. Thanks a lot for the report analysis, which comes in the realities of UNRWA challenges, actually, and hope that we all together we can find way to support youth. And I mentioned to my colleagues before starting the event is that a month ago there was an education conference for youth supported by the Prime Minister himself, actually, and there was a good discussion. And there is a draft strategy, national-wide, actually, regarding how to engage youth in education and the social life. Take into consideration that the Palestinian refugees, and this is not something new or a surprise, are still excluded from a lot of education services. And maybe this is what I did not mention, is that UNRWA is providing secondary education only in Lebanon, not in other fields. This is due to the restrictions of accessibility of the Palestinian youth into secondary schools. Thank you, and I'm available if in case you have any queries in this context.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments and feedback. The floor is now open for Q&A. Yes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Rana, and I work at UNESCO. And I'm very happy, actually, to be here. I was going to miss this report launch for other commitments, and now I feel I'm very glad to be here because this is very relevant to our work. So, as Agata mentioned, we have been supporting secondary education for the past 4 years, almost. Our support is mainly, it covers access to secondary schools. Now, an interesting point that maybe Dr. Hannah can help us understand is the number, the figure that we saw regarding access to secondary education. So the figure we report as a sector is almost 5,000 for this academic year. Now, what's interesting is that UNESCO is supporting non-Lebanese, and this includes Palestinian refugees. So, as you mentioned, you don't have enough secondary schools, maybe. So our support has been extended also to Palestinians. And I think, unfortunately, we do not get disaggregated data that shows nationality. So what we get is from the ministry is just the total figure of registration. But we can see from our studying of enrollment in schools, we have very high numbers in Saida, for example, which probably, this is probably Palestinians. But we still, to this day, we do not get disaggregated data by the ministry. So I'm interested to know the numbers you have shared, whether they are just for Syrian refugees, and this may account for this difference. So this is my first point. I'm also wondering if you have any data on complete, or because I think Mehe doesn't have or doesn't share data to show completion. I mean, taking one student and following the student, because I think still they do not have the data management system that can show that. So whether you have had any access on these figures. One also interesting point that I'd like to know if your report, I haven't honestly read the report, but you know, in Lebanon, secondary education is not compulsory. It's still a non-compulsory level. So this may be also one reason why funding is always targeted to primary level. And I'm wondering if this is a policy recommendation that the report would consider. I mean, especially with Lebanon being committed to achieving SDG 4 and lifelong learning. So whether we can maybe advocate for that. Yeah, and just another point, I mean, we have, as UNESCO, we have been working on supporting secondary education, as UNHCR, Agata mentioned, that UNHCR is also willing to support this gap, because what we have witnessed is an increase in the enrollment numbers, but of course with the quality issues. So we wonder on the points of retention and all that. Unfortunately, our funding has been limited, and this is why it has mainly targeted access. We are very eager to do work on retention and language support, but we always find ourselves that we need to cover this gap. So we just to say that we also are concerned with the quality issues, but unfortunately, with the lack of funding, we haven't been able to do much work in that area. I think UNHCR's community work maybe is more stronger in that area on the language support groups and so on. And that's it. One point that I had, but I know it doesn't touch, it's not included in this study, is there's a question also on the school capacity, because we know from Mehe that what the ministry says is that there is capacity in secondary education, so there's no need for second shift and so on. However, we still have cases of students going to enroll into schools but not finding place in some of the very schools that have really high refugee, areas that have high refugee rates. So there's also this point that is an interesting topic to maybe explore in further or future research. Thank you.
Okay. We can take one more. Yes.
Sophie Zaza, I'm founder for Health and Shield. We take care of refugees, education for children. Do you have a real data for the Syrian refugees? We know that UNRWA has a data about Palestine's refugees. But what's about Syrian refugees? Most of schools, public schools, they haven't really the right numbers. Can we find the right numbers till now? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. That's very, very useful. I'm Wafat Kutub from Word Learning. I was wondering about the ecosystem around the students in tertiary or secondary education. What about the employability of the adults around them? Shouldn't this be connected to or looked at from the context of other sources of income for the family in order to liberate the youth to go to invest more time in their education? The other, the ecosystem is huge. I don't claim that I know it all, but for me, three things come up. The first one is the employability of others in the family or around the youth. The second one is the quality of education that we are giving them. I think everybody's touched on it in some way or another, the language, the TVET, the university. How good is that quality for the youth to actually demand it? Do they see it as life-changing, or do they see it just like another, just ticking the box? Would it really have value or to invest in? So it's the employability, the quality, and the third point that I kept thinking about was, what about just skip me now. I'm sorry, but these were the two main points. I don't want to waste people's time.
Thank you very much. We'll just give some quick answers, and then we'll make another round of questions and answers. The first thing, I'd like to respond to all of them, including Agatha and Rana, and thank you very much for the critiques. Actually, they are extremely interesting, and you've been able to address things that are very innovative to think about as well. The first thing I'd like to address is the issue of evaluation and accountability. And when UNESCO talks about, the data on completion, how many, the number that they have reported from the ministry, which is 5,000, and these are non-Lebanese, etc. I mean, this speaks for itself on the issue of accountability. How can we, as researchers, report, and how can NGOs and INGOs work if we do not have access to information? And so evaluation and accountability, I think, would probably, if we look at these recommendations that we gave based on the research we've done, I think evaluation and accountability rises up to the top. And when we talk about quality, it's not only the refugees who are going through this in our schools. And I'm not only talking about public schools, I'm talking also about private schools. Because not only, we continue to critique public schools and the quality of education at public schools and whatnot, but what about the small private schools, or the private schools, I don't want to say small, that there is also no mechanism of accountability for those schools. And we know very well that 60% of the Lebanese children go to private schools in Lebanon. And still, the quality in these is not questioned. And so I think the most important thing is the issue of evaluation, how important it is now that we've been implementing so many programs after almost a decade, and whether it's the ALP, the BLN, and all of that, and even for UNRWA, I think it's very important to take a step back and look at what has been achieved, and what have we, where have we gone right, where have we gone wrong, and what has been, needs to be addressed. And this is a measure of accountability. The second thing is the issue of the quality. The quality of education. I mean, speaking of language, there is research that shows that actually even the Lebanese children are struggling with languages. And we hear that when we see, for example, some of the programs that offer scholarships for Lebanese students to come into AUB, we hear that their language is they're also struggling with language. We are undergoing now a needs assessment for secondary school students in Lebanon, in public schools, as part of a collaboration between IFI and the Department of Education. And the survey is administered in Arabic to grade 11 students. Many of the terms in Arabic they are struggling with. And so I'm not saying this is indicative, but this, we have to address that the quality is something that cuts across everyone. And what is so interesting about education is that, yes, perhaps we are now talking about the education for refugees, but this is an opportunity to really invest in the sector for everyone in the country. And so, and then I wanted to go to the issue of the cost for TVET students. It is also comparable to the cost of a student in public schools in Lebanon. And so it is, and for people who, pay taxes, it is important to know that when we are enrolling our children in private schools and we are paying taxes for the public schools, so we are paying double for the cost of our children for education. And so actually when you think about it, what is the cost for a Lebanese citizen for education, it is extremely huge. And so this is why we should actually ask for accountability and evaluation. I just wanted to go to the issue of the numbers, 5,000. 5,000 is new. This is this year, this academic year. For what we were able to get as a source of data for secondary schools were actually from the ministry, from the Directorate of Secondary Education, from the ministry. We received all the lists of enrolled students from grade 10, 11, and 12. And these are provided by nationality. Yes. Yes, we were able to retrieve that with permission from the ministry, of course. Now, but it is very also important to notice something here is that we're talking about 3,000, 5,000, whatever it is, enrolled. But how many do actually stay at the end of the year? And this completion rate which you addressed is something that is very interesting, but it's the mystery. Like if we speak of elephants in the room, this is another elephant in the room. This is really important to know. And when we talk about the issue of who are the other adults working in the family, I think this is something that would probably deem further exploration. It's very interesting to look more into that. We don't have that for now, but it's very important, very interesting to speak about the ecosystem. But we know that even when young Syrians are receiving scholarships, some of them prefer to go work and not take the scholarship as is, or some of them even will take the scholarship as a source of income rather than, making, like you mentioned, tick this off my box. We know that investing in education is very important. And the return to this investment is high. Research worldwide shows us that. And for refugees, there is an added value because then they will be able to make more informed decisions. They will no longer have that feeling of vulnerability because they have education with them now. But still, it is really interesting to look at this ecosystem that you're speaking of. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
The only thing that I wanted to add on the last point, which you posed, is about, what's the competitive advantage of taking a job versus going to school. And I think the data across the region, and we've seen this in PISA, international PISA assessments, the Arab world, students in the Arab world actually have the highest ambitions in the world for educational expectations. I think up to 75% of students in the countries that participated in PISA wanted to go to university, compared to around, I think, 45% in the OECD. So I think there's no question, that students want their education. I think it's just a matter of, their families, their priorities, and it's unfortunate. And I think that's the thing that we need to keep in mind as educational providers is that it's not necessarily that they want to make these choices, they just don't really have other options. And so our job is to try and make as much education available, good quality education available to them so that they can have more options in the future and they can support their families better. Thank you.
Just one comment about the capacity. I agree. We do have capacity in all sectors, probably, in education in Lebanon. But when it comes to basic education, it's a matter of geographical distribution of schools. There's a famous joke in the education sector, I don't know if you've heard of it, but that says that if a student, in the public school would threaten a teacher and tell them, if you don't treat me well, I'm now going to go home and you will be jobless. That means the ratio to students to teachers is very low in the country. And so where these schools are distributed impacts the capacity. And even the Lebanese, again, are also, if you go to Mankoubin, which is in the north and one of the most vulnerable localities in the country, some parents will pull out their girls from the public schools because the secondary school is not available in their neighborhood, and they do not want to send their girls further apart to the next neighborhood or something. So there is capacity, I agree, yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. I'm Maha Haidar. I'm the director of the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program at AUB. Thank you for the impressive presentations. Thank you for the collaboration and everything that's going on. Through our experience with young people, and I'm talking Lebanese, Syrian refugees, Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, we feel that across there is ambiguity among the youth about their future. Even those who are enrolled at AUB on a full scholarship to graduate with an MA or a BS or like a graduate or an undergraduate degree, they all report this ambiguity. This is of course aggravated by the fact that Syrian and Palestinians have a lot of restrictions on employment. For Lebanese, the problem is the economic situation. And of course, I am not familiar with the area, but I expect it's the same in other countries in the region, given the issues that are taking place. So I just thinking that as this is inspirational for us, it's very important to communicate these efforts to the youth. And it's very important to involve the youth in these initiatives and the research effort, because it would give them visibility maybe, it would give them hope, and I think they would be able to contribute to a great extent to all these, at least if not at the level of policy, although I think that would be possible, in the level of the implementation of these policies. Because we feel that some of them are jumping from opportunity to opportunity just because every opportunity gives a little bit more hope than the other. But eventually, the future is very vague. Thank you.
Can I answer later?
Thank you very much. Tamer Amin, the Department of Education. I'm enjoying this panel discussion very much, and the results are very interesting. And I just wanted to make a comment about this theme that sort of keeps reoccurring, which is the issue of language. So I think that we are at a position where there are very many things happening in the country and the region in relation to language and education. And I'm sort of saying this as a kind of a call to you, to all of us, to begin to consolidate these things together. So at this moment in Beit Beirut, there's a language and resilience exhibit happening, organized by the British Council. Over the last few years, the CERD, the Center for Education Research and Development, have been including in their teacher training, in their training package by the trainers of the center, which they then deliver to teachers in the country, on what they refer to as CLIL. They're using a different language now, but CLIL refers to Content Language Integrated Learning. So it's an initiative that kind of emerged in Europe to enhance language teaching by integrating it with other subjects. So, and in the Department of Education, we're doing research on these issues with science and mathematics in particular. But also within the university, within AUB, the University Preparatory Program is addressing the issues of language preparation and other forms of remedial preparation for students to enter university. So what I'm trying to say is that, and I'm sure that there are other things that I haven't mentioned, you know, but I think it would be very, very useful to all of us, actually, who are interested in this issue from a variety of different angles, to put our efforts together to actually consolidate what we know and what the different, even a project that just puts together what these different projects are, rather a report that puts together what these projects are, would be a very, very helpful resource. Which is, I mean, in a climate in which, of course, the ministry is not playing the kind of coordination role that we would hope of it. And so some document that will bring together a picture of what all of these different projects are, the successes, the discovered challenges, etc., I think would be very useful. So maybe as a follow-up to this report, that might be an interesting direction to go in. But I think there's just, you know, there is a critical mass now of some knowledge, some greater understanding of the challenges, some solutions that it would be time to address. And a final point, there are many countries around the world that are struggling with a similar sort of thing. And so to also, you know, broaden our spectrum of investigation to see what's happening elsewhere. Just to say one example, South Africa. South Africa has a very clear focus on the issue of language and integration into higher education because of the post-apartheid challenges of increasing access to education for people in a wide variety of walks of life in South Africa. So just a call for an initiative.
Hi, my name's Aisha. I'm from Sombula. Again, a very interesting conversation. And I just realized there is one point as a local NGO working in Bika with Syrian youth. We do provide them with counseling and, you know, referrals to all the scholarships of universities. And a key point that keeps coming up is the geographic access they have. Most of these scholarships are for traditional higher education institutions. So maybe when you're talking about financing and scholarships, they could be for more non-traditional methods like MOOC-based or online-based learning, because for youth in Bika, the number of opportunities they have access to geographically is very little. It's mostly based in Beirut or the big cities, and a lot of refugee youth, that's a key barrier for them because they're not able to move out of their locations, family, work, all of these different aspects involved. So maybe we can also include aspects where we're thinking about what the higher education they're getting is. Is it just universities they have to attend in big areas, relocate, or can it be some other form of learning where they're still able to continue learning and get their formal certifications? Thank you.
I can respond to a few things. Just on the last point, very much agree with you, and I think that's why we raised online and blended learning as an option. Obviously, there are some restrictions, and we as a foundation have been supporting students, mostly at the postgraduate level, with master's degrees and with micromasters, which is a shortened, a half a master's degree. And we've, some students, some refugee youth have been attracted to it, but obviously there are a lot of barriers. So I think it's about exploring the modalities in which something like that could work for those kinds of students, and ideally connecting it to other opportunities, whether it's internships or some practical skills development opportunities that they could also access, so that it's beneficial beyond just the experience online, but also making sure that they have enough support so that they can succeed in something like that. There's enough low quality online learning opportunities, so we really don't want to promote that impression that people may have, broadly speaking, around online learning. And so I think investing in the right quality of it is very critical. On English, I'm really glad you raised that point, and I think we all feel the same way. As a regional foundation, we're also looking at other countries, and so I myself, and I'm sure my other colleagues have had those discussions with many other organizations, and we ourselves don't have the expertise, but we struggle with it with our students and our scholarships. And we're talking about not just refugees, but the top quality students that come from disadvantaged backgrounds are going to AUB, need English language support before they access the university. So we're always seeking solutions to this problem. And I've had a few conversations with people who are interested in doing something like this in Jordan already. So it would be great if we could do something, a comparative report, what's happening in those two contexts, Lebanon, Jordan, quite similar, same types of students. So it would be great to have a conversation afterwards, and maybe we can pull together the different players that are working in this sector. And just on the final point for MasterCard, I very much agree with you. I think it would be great to raise more awareness among young people about sort of our findings and to engage them more. That's why we've decided to end this event with a student panel, because it's always important to hear their perspectives. Ultimately, they're the ones that are living this experience, and no one can speak about it in the way they can. At the foundation, with our research, we always try to engage some of our scholars in our research. With previous reports that we've published, we've shared the reports with them, and we've asked them to talk about what it means to them and how important it is. But I still think we could always be doing more. And whenever we speak to our students, I agree with you, they'll always choose to pursue further education because they don't have enough guidance. Even with the guidance that we try to provide, I think the fact that it's sometimes provided a little bit too late doesn't help. And so I think that's why we advocate for more support, academic guidance and counseling starting from high school, because I think they need role models who can help guide them and inform them about sort of how to make these decisions and what to expect. Because with the latest study that we did on college and career readiness among Arab youth, broadly speaking across the whole region, we found that students go into university feeling pretty confident. They did really well in school. Their grades were excellent because it's relatively easy if you're studious and you know how to memorize. You can do okay. But once they get into university, they're shocked. Once they start speaking to students that have graduated or are close to graduating and hear about the high unemployment rates and what's waiting for them, it's a big transition. And I think engaging with older students, engaging with people like us, hearing more about what to expect and being prepared for that is critical.
Can I add one thing? Especially when mentioning the ambiguity that students are facing, I think maybe we need to review some scholarships program and ensure a bridging program before these students are directly put maybe into campuses where also they don't know which subject they need to choose. So we've seen some model of bridging program that have proven them their values, though it hasn't been a long time they started being implemented. I'm in AUB, so Padilea program is one of them, as well as Chiron one, as well as others. So we might think of maybe requesting from students seeking scholarship support to go into bridging programs where language would be supported, as well as ICT skills, as well as connected learning courses. So it is preparing them and orienting them into what type of support they're going to be seeking. So it might be a box to tick in our scholarships programs, where whenever a student has passed through a bridging program, would have an additional point in the grading system, for example. So we can ensure less dropout and more orientation from beginning. Also, I want to mention that just for the language, just keep also the option and the value of having also 2 foreign languages being taught in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. So I'm raising the Francophonie flag. But just these are other options, because secondary schools have sometimes, in some areas, for example, in Akkar, I know that most of secondary schools are providing the French as second language. So we also, it's obsolete to provide only English when we know that the student would be going through a French pathway for language, as well as in universities later on. Some university sections, when it comes to the Lebanese university, only would be providing French as second language. So also, let's put it as a plus, on the plus side. And we have seen some very nice models of students being resilient enough and teaching themselves the French as being easier sometimes.
No, I just want to close with the idea that, because we want to give a chance for our young people to also speak, but probably combining the idea of the participatory approach with the language to not only kind of consolidate the initiatives, but also hear from the young people themselves on the language, especially those who have been in the Lebanese system for some time.
So thank you everyone for your insights.
Thank you.
Our second panel for the day is titled How Education Transforms Lives, and the panelists are 3 scholars of the Abdelaziz Al Ghureir Refugee Education Fund at different educational institutions here in Lebanon. This panel will be moderated by Ms. Nicole Eid Abu Haidar, Executive Director of the Unite Lebanon Youth Project.
Good morning, everyone. It is so exciting to be in a room full of people who are committed to education, who believe that education does transform lives, that education is the key for change and for hope for a better future. It is clear everybody in this room is committed to this and working hard to advance our work, whatever our work is, to make sure that everyone has equal access to quality education. So it's very exciting to be here, and I'm very honored to present to you today 3 students who are actually transforming their lives. These 3 students are students who are benefiting from the program funded by, like my colleague said, Abdelaziz Ghureir Education Fund for Refugees, and working with us at ULIP, and now they have access to education. My guest represents the 3 components of this program. Munir here represents the first component, or stream as we call it. He is one of 152 students who are now on scholarships studying at universities, seeking undergraduate degrees. Rana is one of 58 students also on a scholarship program seeking vocational diplomas that will help them for employability. And Ali is engaged in our preparatory program, that 2-year program that we have created, and we call it the Change Program, to work with 11th graders for 2 years, preparing them for tertiary education and focusing really on English and on the skills that they need to succeed, to enter into university and stay and succeed at university. Welcome, you all. I will start with you, Munir, if you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to hear our stories. My name is Munir Sirawan, and I'm in a family of 7. I'm the second child, and I'm studying BA in Radio TV in the American University of Science and Technology, AUST, and yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Hello, I'm happy to be here with you and joining this panel. My name is Rana Majal, and I come from a family of 6 where I do live with my parents and my 3 brothers. I was born and raised in Lebanon, exactly in the south, Sur. I went into a public school there, and right now I am an AUB graduate with a BS in chemistry. And thanks for ULIP for giving me this opportunity and supporting me through those 3 years. And right now I'm in the process of pursuing my teaching diploma, and also I would like to thank Abdelaziz Al Ghorair Foundation for giving me this opportunity.
My name is Ali Balkis. I am 16 years old. I come from a family of 4 and I'm the youngest. I used to live in Harat Ahrak, but then we moved to Boraj Barajne camp because we couldn't afford rent anymore. I moved throughout many schools, but now I am in Galil School, Onorwa, in 11th grade. Oh, and just for the record, my dream is to become a film producer.
I hope your dream will come true. So Ali, in your 11th grade right now, can you tell us about 1 or 2 challenges that you might be facing in your education?
Well, throughout my academic years, I have faced 2 challenges. The first one is that many students in my classroom disrupt the flow of the teaching, rendering me unable to focus. And the second challenge is that many subjects didn't quite meet my expectations. For example, philosophy. When we first started, I thought we were going to learn about ancient philosophers and what inspired them and drove them to think the way they did. But instead, we were just comparing it to other subjects instead of quite truly studying what it is.
But Ali, the challenge of students being disruptive in the classroom, I think that's universal. Every classroom has that. So why do you think you have this challenge, and what are you doing about it?
Well, Ms. Nicole, of course, every classroom has a few disrupting students. But when there are 35 students and only 1 teacher, then it is beyond her control. There's nothing she can do about it. And as for philosophy, I still wanted to learn. So at home, I started researching about them on my own leisure, and because I want to be a film producer, I watched movies about them.
Okay, so you are managing to meet your challenge well.
Yeah,
great. Rana, how about your experience? Have you faced any challenges in the education programs you've been in?
Well, when I was at school, as I was a hardworking student, so I didn't face so much challenges at the school level. I was recording very well there at that time. But the real challenge was from a personal side, where my father got sick, and exactly I was at grade 12. Here, I have to be worried about my future. So I'm worried about my father, and at the same time, I'm worried about my future. So what's going to happen next? And absolutely, my father won't tell me that I can't afford sending you to a good university such as AUB. So I realized that I have to work extremely hard to get a scholarship. And that's what I did, actually. And I figured out that the only way to do that is the only way to let my father to be proud about me and at least forget a little bit what happened to him through the past few months is to get a scholarship. And that's what I did. And I got a scholarship, and I got enrolled at AUB. I got my BS, and I faced my challenges as they were. It was an overwhelming load for me, but I made it, and here I am today.
Great. So Munir, Ali faced his challenges through individual learning, taking it on upon himself. Rana faced it through continuing to work hard. How about you? Do you have any challenges you want to tell us about? And please tell us how you faced them.
Well, I want to say that I lost my home 6 years ago, so we had to move on to Saida. So from Damascus to Saida. So at the very beginning of my education journey, it was very hard to interact with people, to have friends. I was very lonely, and loneliness kills. So, and not knowing how to interact, how to socialize with my friends, it was quite difficult for me, quite challenging for me. Yeah, so, and the second challenge was the accent of English. I mean, oh my God, my accent was terrible, and I've been bullied a lot for my accent. Yeah, and how I faced them. For my loneliness at the beginning, thankfully, I asked my parents what to do. So my dad told me that I should wait, time will fix it, and I should be patient about it. So I've waited a lot of times. Then I had an idea to be a volunteer in a lot of associations, to interact, to blend in, to figure out how do they interact? I mean, how to become like them, how to have friends. So as long as I started volunteering in a lot of associations, I started to have friends, they started accepting me, accepting my family. The idea of Syrian helping an Lebanese association for helping refugees as well, and helping the Lebanese society and achieving sustainable development and a lot of things, it's quite beautiful for me, it was, and it helped me a lot. And for my accent, I started to watch a lot of movies and reading a lot of books and listening to a lot of music. I mean, I still watch the movie like 4th time. The first time I watched it with Arabic subtitles, the second time with the English subtitles, the third time without subtitles, to try to memorize the script and speak with the actors and actresses, which is, I love it because I want to be a director, so I'm very good at it. Thank you.
So we have two future directors at the table. I hope so. So, bravo for meeting your challenges, and it seems like you all did it on your own or with the support of your families. Munir, since I'm with you, other than the obvious advantage of a scholarship that you have now covering your tuition costs, is this scholarship helping you in any way? What is its benefit for you?
Without the scholarship, I wouldn't be in a private university. I mean, I did not expect to get a scholarship or to continue my university because, well, right now I work and I study at the same time. So I thought when I graduated from school, I thought that I'm not gonna continue my university because I cannot afford it. I've been working for 4 years, and honestly, I cannot afford it. And neither my dad. So this scholarship helped me to continue my dream, to continue my education, and to follow my lovely major, radio TV, and such university, AUST, which is a very big deal for me. I mean, and this scholarship, it will make me a valuable person in the future. It's gonna form a future for me that I can become just like anyone in this room, a valuable person who can change or develop, improve, have an inspire, influence, and impact on the society, because it's a very big deal.
Rana?
Well, for me, in May 2018, I graduated. I got my BS. And here comes the question, what's the next step? So I was worried about, mainly I was thinking of joining, of course, the job market. So I have to search for a job. I applied for plenty of jobs, but unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to be accepted at one of them. I know we Palestinians do have job opportunities, but in fact, they are limited. So I started feeling worried what I'm going to do next. I don't want to be a passive person. I don't want to I graduated, I'm having my BS and not doing anything with it. So I started mainly when I was in my junior year, I realized that I wanted to join the educational field. I want to become a teacher. I want to, get my BS in chemistry. I wanted to teach chemistry for so many reasons. But for that, I need a teaching diploma. And my scholarship, I will end after 1 year, so I need a new scholarship to support me through the teaching diploma. So, and I know it's impossible right now to find no one covers teaching diploma or supports teaching diploma. Rarely we can find such programs. So at the end of July, I received an email from ULIP where they informed us that there are opportunities for those who are willing to do their teaching diploma, and these opportunities are funded by Abdulaziz Al Ghurer Foundation. So, and knowing that the deadline for the teaching diploma have already passed, 3 months passed over the deadline, and even though I applied a late application and I got accepted, and now I have only 2 months to finish, to be done with my teaching diploma, and hopefully to be able to join my career as a teacher, to join the job market, hopefully.
Great, so it is this scholarship that is unique, is helping you with your employability and bettering your future because the position is accessible to you. Ali, my question to you is a little bit different. Ali started the Change program, this preparatory program that works with 11th graders for 2 years. Strong intervention to prepare them, as I said, for university. You only started 3 months ago. So do you feel ready to tell us how this program, how this fund is helping you in any way? Is it?
Yes, it is. Well, at first, I wasn't going to participate in this program. I thought, I'm good in English, I don't need this. And I have never been happier to say that I was wrong. This program helped me in more ways than I could imagine, not just in writing, but also in communication. And it greatly improved my social skills. Because I used to be a shy boy. I would have never done anything like this a few months ago. And this is just in a couple of months. It's really amazing.
And here you are sitting facing the crowd. Now what I have is a question to all of you, and you tell me whoever wants to answer. The question is not about you. The question is about other people in your lives. Are other people in your lives, could be family, friends, anyone in your life, do you feel that this scholarship or this program, is it impacting other people in your life? Because we heard how it's helping you. Whoever wants to answer.
Can I ask? Sure. I think, okay, there are plenty of people benefiting, but mainly I think our parents, because they are feeling relieved about our future, because it's never easy for the parents to it's never easy until we. Someday we'll become parents, so we'll understand what they feel. Being in safe hands, being granted opportunities that they never imagined that they will give us one day. So I think our parents are the most one who are influenced by our scholarships more than us, maybe.
Great, so that will enlarge the ceremony.
Yeah, I want to add something. Well, I already give a free photography workshop in associations that I've been enrolled. So it started to helping others. So I'm started to affecting others from this gift, the scholarship, because of my major as radio TV. So I take a lot of courses in general, which was amazing to take a lot of courses that I can help others to teach others and to help others with these courses. So 2 months ago, I gave a photography workshop for the Lebanese Red Cross, which is a very big deal. And they called me for it. They called me that we need you to give a free photography workshop. It was a great experience for me to do so. So yeah, definitely. And after the graduation, after 2 years from now, I'm gonna help a lot of people. I'm gonna help society with my movies, with messages that I'm gonna deliver to help, to inspire, to influence, hopefully. Thank you.
Great, so you're saying that the spillover effect is already starting from this scholarship, and you see it as a gift that's going to keep giving in the future? Ali, do you have anything?
Well,
is anyone else?
Much like Rana, my parents are also proud and relieved that my future is well insured and is in such good hands. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Now, not a question, but a request. You see that this is a room full of people, NGOs, funders, ministries, universities, schools, and we all are trying to find better ways, different ways, work harder. on making sure that all youth, more youth, have access to quality education. What is your message to us? Can you share a message? Can you share a piece of advice? Can we learn from you? Anyone?
I think if we can reach students at earlier stage, more than just grade 11, at earlier stage and even at primary level, it would be much better and more effective. Because as I was in a public school, and we all know, from a personal experience, I've been taught to be a passive learner in most of my years, actually, and I realized that until I reached AUB, when I started figuring out that I wasn't learning how to think critically. So reaching students at primary levels, it would be much better and much helpful and more effective, because thinking critically is much more important to invest in our communities and invest in our world. So that's my suggestion.
Any advice?
Yeah, may I say it?
Yeah.
I want to say first, thank you so much thank you Abdul Aziz Ghurer, thank you Yulib, thank you everyone for changing the stereotype of the Syrian Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. But most importantly, something has shocked me in the statistics that the ladies that showed. Just 6% of the refugees are in universities. That's quite sad. I felt very sad because just 6% are universities. I mean, it's a very nice, great thing to finish your education, secondary and primary school. But it's a very important to continue your university. I mean, nowadays, without university degree, I mean, you're literally nothing. I mean, I said that to myself before the scholarship. I felt sad that I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna work as a freelancer in any studio. But without university degree, I'm nothing. I can't help anyone without the university degree. So 6% of the refugees are in universities. That's quite sad. That's something you should take into consideration, because I just had a thought that I would love to split my scholarship with other Syrian. It's a very big deal. I mean, university, it's a very important thing to finish, because after the university, here comes the future. Here comes the change. Here comes the development, not just for yourself, or your family, or just your neighborhood, for the whole society. I'm sorry because I reacted, but it's a very big deal.
Ali, is there advice for all of us in the room? Anything we can do differently?
What can I say after all of that? But I just want this program to keep growing, and I want you to know that there are jobs other than engineer and doctor. There are many dream jobs. I want you to make sure they are all possible. Thank you.
Ali, do you think Lebanon gave you a chance, good chance?
Yeah, decent chance, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have 2 minutes. My timekeeper is telling me we have 2 more minutes. I think in a way you've gone through your closing remarks. Are there any other closing remarks, any other messages you want us to hear before we say thank you?
And as a final message, I would like really to thank Abdulaziz Al Ghurer for really supporting me through this opportunity, doing my TD. And you really made me had life in giving me such opportunity, because, and I as always used to borrow the slogan of AUB, that's at the entrance of AUB, that they may have life and have it more abundantly. And yes, I had life and I have had it more abundantly. And I hope you're gonna be able to give it more to others. And I hope to perform my role as a teacher in the future, to give it also back to others. I wish that. Thank you so much.
Do you have a closing remark, Ali?
I want you to make sure that every little kid knows that we are all equal, and all it takes to succeed is just a little bit of hard work. That's all it takes, just a little bit of hard work.
Great.
Yeah, and I just want to say that if you do in the future programs that combine the Lebanese and Syrians and Palestinians together, it would be a great thing to contribute to social integration and interaction, so we can all become one person in this beautiful society. Thank you.
I actually confess that I cut it down by 5 minutes because they all have to go back to universities and schools. I apologize. So thank you very much. Let's meet outside.
So thank you, Munir, Rana, and Ali, for your sharing your experiences. In light of today's discussions, there is still a pressing need to address the secondary, TVET, and tertiary education of vulnerable and marginalized youths residing in Jordan and Lebanon. This work is important because it's informing us of the changes that are happening rapidly in the sector and the responses to such changes. We hope this project will be helpful for organizations and governments that are working in this domain. Working in collaboration with other organizations and entities is also key. Wiona Gills, a professor at Rameta, said in one of her presentations, education is the only thing that refugees can take back with them, so it's only fair to give them this opportunity and give them the best. Before inviting you to the reception, I would like to thank the teams at IFI and Abdallah Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education for making this happen. Ya'tikun al-afiyah. On behalf of IFI and Abdallah Al-Ghureir Foundation for Education, thank you all for being with us today and for your valuable input. We'd like to invite you to enjoy the reception outside. Thank you.